I want to talk a little bit about control. I think a lot of times in marriages, especially when you first get married or even an established marriage, there's a lot of controlling going on that maybe sometimes you're not even aware of. But can you give some practical reasons and or examples on why trying to control your spouse won't help you but hurt you?
Control is such an interesting part of marriage because we all try to control people in different ways.
And sometimes unconsciously, it's learned.
Yeah.
You've learned to manipulate to get your way, and you don't even know that you're doing it on your spouse.
No.
So why don't we start here? How do you identify that you are trying to control your spouse?
I think the only way that you'll ever know that you're trying to control your spouse is by keeping space in the relationship for your spouse to come to you and let you know that. I really don't believe there's a way where, especially if it's a thing that you learned growing up to do to kind of get your way in certain areas of relationships, I don't think that you're going to be able to just light bulb moment realize that you're controlling another person in that same way.
Yeah.
That other person will have to point that out to you, and you'll have to be humble enough to receive that and figure out if it's true.
Yeah. I think there is a few ways that you might be able to tell. Because I found out when we were first married that I was trying to control you, but I didn't know it. I read this book that was really helpful. But what helped me realize that is when I was, instead of just asking you direct questions, I was trying to do things to get you to do what I wanted.
Yeah.
Instead of just asking you, would you do this?
Right.
Do you want to do this? I was going around to get my way, which I didn't even know until I read this book. I think it's called Finding the Hero in Your Husband. And it was like listing all these ways that women like try to manipulate men purposefully and like unconsciously. And it was really helpful. So I think that is one way, like learning the way you communicate. And are you clearly communicating and asking those questions and giving what you desire, telling your husband what you desire or your spouse what you desire, and then letting them choose what to do with it. Instead of being like in your head, being like, this is what I want. And I think if I do this and this and this, I might get them to do what I want. Yeah. That would be manipulation. Instead of just saying, this is what I want.
Yeah.
I would really love it if you did this or whatever it is, and then let them decide. Give them the choice, right?
I think those are all factors that make up control in relationships. But your question is, well, I think a way to approach your question is, how do you identify these things?
Right.
And like you said, I think education is a really, really important tool to help us identify these things.
Right.
Our spouse coming to us and telling us about these things is great.
Yeah.
But if they don't even realize that these things are going on and they're being manipulated, this could go on for years, and there could be a lot of envy, and there could be a lot of resentment that just develops and seeps into your relationship, and that can go unnoticed for a long time as it builds.
Yeah.
So I think education is a great way. I hear things all the time in podcasts, in books that I read, that are just light bulb moments where if you're humble enough to hear, if you're humble enough to learn.
That's key.
That is key. You need to always be humble enough to learn if you're going to be in a marriage.
Yeah.
And if you can bring that mentality out into all of life where you're being educated and where people are, this is such a great thing about society, is that they teach you what's acceptable and not acceptable if you're willing to learn.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everything...
Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad.
Yeah, there's a difference between society and culture.
Okay.
So I think culture is just this kind of pervading thing that is trying to define what society looks and acts and is like. That isn't actually representative of society in the actual day-to-day relationships that you have with people. In those relationships, you'll have more authentic people who will be able to influence you
Right.
one way or another. You don't have to be influenced by anybody, but if you're open to being influenced, that'll be really helpful in you being able to highlight and say, wow, I don't like how that person controlled
Yeah.
her husband.
Yeah.
Or I don't like how that husband spoke to his wife.
Yeah.
And when you're aware of these things, you're able to be educated and learn
Yeah. On
and
what
then
to do and
grow.
not do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think that's just really helpful is education and being open to learning.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So I think we did give some examples
Yeah. It's hard. It's
It's
hard to give
hard.
examples of control.
because it looks so different.
It
so
looks different in every single marriage, every single relationship, every single personality that's involved in the relationships.
right. So the first step, I guess, is educating yourself so that you can identify if you are trying to control
Hmm.
your spouse. Can you give some reasons on why trying to control your spouse isn't going to help you, but it's going to hurt you?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, is your spouse you?
Mm,
And are you your spouse?
right.
If that transfer and that is transfusion the right term?
I don't know.
I'm thinking of just the way that you're basically sharing each other's life.
Yeah.
That's what happens in a transfusion, right? You're sharing blood with the other person. This is very
Yeah. I mean, blood.
Not-
I don't do good with blood, so I'm not envisioning
people
that.
have just passed out. No, but when you're sharing each other's life,
Mhm.
that is going to influence the answer to that question of the reasons why control is not good.
Right.
Because would you want to be controlled?
Yes.
No, then controlling your spouse is controlling you.
Yeah.
Anytime that you hinder your spouse's growth, you
hinder
hinder
your
her
own growth.
ability
Mhm.
to develop in any shape or form. You speak to her in a way that is diminishing and you hinder her emotional growth. You use manipulation and fear. Mentally, you're going to be hindering her development. So there are so many ways in which control is affecting you because you are your spouse.
Because it will actually come back to you too.
Of course it will
Because
come back
if
to
it's
you.
negatively affecting your spouse, they're not going to be able to grow and challenge you or love you well.
Right.
And so you are hurting yourself as you hurt them.
And they will only want to give what they're being received.
Yeah.
What is being received.
Yeah.
So honestly, it's on you on
Yeah.
whether you want to be manipulated and
Right.
you want to be controlled in your relationship, because that's what you're going to receive from your spouse.
Yeah.
Because what other option does she have if she's being controlled?
Right.
You know, and I'm using the male example just because I'm the one speaking right now.
Yeah.
But it goes both ways.
Yep.
You know, like you're saying, there was ways in which you would ask me questions that was more of a manipulation to get what you wanted.
Right.
But that was affecting me.
And then affecting me.
Right. And if you're not getting honest opinions from me on what I might actually want to do, then
Right.
you're not actually learning more about me. And so our development has just been stalled.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.